Chapter 4 Nolan, the Kidnapping. Nolan sat in his Marshwood blue tournament tent, glaring at the door cover as it flapped around in the breeze. He usually enjoyed when princes and knights came to town for games of valor, but this time he had to sit things out. This is so stupid, he thought. Littagale shouldn't have to marry one of these buffoons. They just want to be king. They don't care about her. Nolan pushed out of his chair and walked to the exit. Throwing the door cover open, he stepped out into the morning air. The tournament camp was a permanent fixture outside the walls of Marshwood. Colorful tents dotted the camp, and each tent lodged a prince and his entourage. The whinnies of horses rang all around, and squires and servants scampered about on errands for their lords. In the middle of the tournament camp lay the spectator stands and arenas of combat. Dozens of princes stood in groups talking in the arenas or else practicing with their swords, bows, and javelins. A passing street vendor shouted, "Popcorn! Get your popcorn here! 1 whole bucket for only a shilling!" "Place your bets on your favorite prince!" shouted another man. He held a large scroll and a bag of coins. Nolan blew out his lips. "There's not a single prince I want to bet on," he thought. He watched as townspeople made their way to the spectator stands. The seats by the jousting arena were already nearly full. Several spectators held up colorfully painted signs, and Nolan saw one declaring, "Prince Deke is my #1 draft pick for fantasy jousting." Ugh. Nolan turned and walked to find Casper. He found his friend buying a cookie from a little boy with a basket of baked goods strapped to his little frame. Casper wore his usual hunting clothes, dark boots, dark pants, and his leather defend-all purple jerkin. He and Nolan were the only 2 princes not dressed in their finest armor today. Casper took a bite of the cookie. Not bad. Then he spotted Nolan and gave a friendly nod. "Have you seen your sister yet?" "No. Dad said she's in the meadow clearing her head before the tournament starts." Casper made a face as 2 princes in armor walked by. "Anything I can do?" "Not unless you want to marry my sister and spare us this mess." Casper nearly choked on the cookie. "What? But why is I involved?" He was blushing. "I mean, your sister is, but she's your sister, and Nolan raised an eyebrow. "Relax, I was kidding." Casper swallowed and tried to recover. "Oh, yeah, I knew that." Nolan kicked at the dirt. "Something like this is bound to happen eventually. I just can't believe Mom and Dad are okay with this." Back in the arena, the tournament announcer's voice shouted, "And in this corner, Prince Deke of Archwild." The roar of the crowd followed. Nolan sighed and pointed a thumb back to the jousting arena. "Come on, we might as well watch the games." He and Casper walked across camp to stand against the spectators' fence. They arrived just in time to see Deke Archwild ride his tall, black stallion to one end of the jousting runway. His black armor caught the morning sun, and Nolan guessed Deke was already hot inside. His horse kicked at the dirt in anticipation. On the other end of the runway, Prince Como of Mattea sat awkwardly on his horse. He was a robust young man who barely fit in his cherry-red armor. His horse had a nervous twitch and kept glancing at Deke's stallion. Casper leaned over to Nolan. "Deke's going to knock this guy off his horse on the first try." Nolan smirked. "Not necessarily. I had a chat with Rainbow Sprinkles." "Who's Rainbow Sprinkles?" Deke's stallion turned his head to where Nolan stood on the sidelines. While keeping up its show of pawing the dirt and snorting for the spectators, the horse winked at Nolan. You... Casper looked from Nolan to the horse. "That's Rainbow Sprinkles? I thought Deke's horse's name was Monster Striker." "He prefers Rainbow Sprinkles." Casper let his head fall against the fence. "I can't believe this." Then he lifted his head sharply and looked at Nolan. "Wait, is this why you're so good at jousting?" Nolan was offended. "I would never cheat. Well, except for right now, but this doesn't count. Just watch." "Ready!" shouted the announcer. He raised a large flag and swung it sharply down. "Charge!" The horses took off toward each other, neighing and pounding the dirt. The spectators were on their feet, cheering on their champions. The next instant, Deke's stallion veered off course and pulled up to a sudden stop, nearly sitting on its haunches. Deke's metal-armored bulk was too heavy to fight gravity, and he flew off and over Rainbow Sprinkles' head, crashing to the dirt with a loud rattle. The crowd gasped in surprise, and those who'd been cheering Prince Como started laughing hysterically. Casper turned to Nolan, who couldn't help a huge grin on his face. Suddenly, a high-pitched scream drowned out the commotion of the tournament. Everyone stopped what they were doing and looked to face the same direction, the direction of the meadow beyond the camp. Casper's wide brown eyes looked at Nolan. Was that? Littagale! Nolan took off running. Casper ran right beside him, and together they ran across the camp, past the tents, and into the open meadow on the far side of the camp. Some Marshwood people, along with a few princes and knights, had beaten them here. Everyone was looking around the open field, searching for their princess. Littagale! Called Nolan in a panic. Then, a giant shadow swept over the meadow. Everyone froze. Nolan and Casper looked up, and Nolan felt his blood drain to his toes. The giant tail of a dragon dipped into view first as the great beast flew overhead. Then its wings swept down in a thrust that blew the grass in crazy swirls and swept the hair back from Nolan's face. Then the dragon's wings rose to soar higher, and they saw the dragon's body. Its size was terrifying. Its scales were dark blackish green and reflected sunlight like metal armor. Its head was the size of an entire tent, covered in leathery skin and scales. Pointing ears like that of a horse lay flat against its skull. Horns swept back off its head. Almond-shaped, lime-colored eyes glared at the people below. "It's Tor!" cried a townswoman. "Tor the Intolerant has returned!" Then Nolan saw what the beast carried in its giant claws. "Littagale!" he shouted. His sister was clinging desperately to the dragon's tail and paw in an attempt not to fall. Her blue dress fluttered in the wind as the dragon soared over the meadow. "Ah!" she screamed. "Save me!" "Littagale!" Nolan shouted again. Not thinking, he took off across the meadow and chased after the dragon. The downward drafts from its wings nearly knocked him flat to the dirt, but he stumbled and kept running. It was no use. Soon the beast flew out of the meadow and over the trees of the forest beyond, out of sight. Casper had run with him, and he came to stand with Nolan and stare up at the sky where the dragon had disappeared. He panted for air. "Is that really Tor?" Nolan could only nod. He was trying to be brave, but he felt a wave of panic and nearly started crying. "The same dragon that took your mother?" Nolan again nodded. "I thought King Wesick defeated Tor." "He did," Nolan finally got out. "He didn't kill the dragon, though. He just wounded the beast enough that I had to slink farther into its lair. That's how he rescued my mom." "His lair? In Mount Shadow?" asked Casper. "Yeah. So that's where he'll take Littagale, right?" Casper stepped around Nolan to put his hands on Nolan's shoulders and make Nolan look at him. "Right? That's where the dragon will take her. We know where to get her back." Nolan took a breath. Casper's right, he thought. Dragons take princesses to their lairs. They like trophies. Princesses are like trophies to them. Littagale will be in Mount Shadow. Now, reader, before you get too concerned for Littagale, think about this. When Wesick and Mattea talked to Littagale about unavoidable marriage, Mattea paused in thought and gazed at the stained glass window of Tor the Intolerant. Also, Mattea specifically said she was not just singing in a meadow when the dragon took her, and Littagale was specifically in a meadow when Tor took her. And again, Wesick was the only suitor who defeated Tor when Mattea chose to marry him. Get it yet? Well, keep reading. Everything's fine. "Attention! Attention, everyone!" called a Marshwood knight. "King Wesick has arrived and is going to make an announcement in light of—" He looked up in the direction the dragon had gone. Everyone understood and hurried back to the tournament camp. Nolan wanted very much to talk to his parents, but the crowds were by now too dense between him and the tournament arena's royal dais. Stuck, Nolan stood with Casper and watched with everyone else as King Wesick stood tall on the VIP platform and raised his hands for everyone's attention. "My people, my friends, my neighbors," Wesick began. He had to take a moment to collect himself. Nolan, seeing his father's emotion, nearly started crying again. No, he thought, Dad has a plan. Dad must have a plan. "It is with a heavy heart that I tell you, Tor the Intolerant is back," said the king. "My daughter has just now been taken by the dragon to his lair in Mount Shadow." The townspeople who'd only just arrived gasped in horror. "I fear for my daughter," Wesick went on, "but I take comfort that fate saw fit to bring us all together at this time." He turned to where many of the princes were gathered. "I beg you fine men to come to our aid. As I saved my wife from this foul beast years ago, so I ask you now to save my daughter." The princes looked at each other and seemed to realize what they'd landed in. Wesick glanced behind him where Mattea stood with tears in her eyes. As is custom, Whichever of you princes rescues my daughter will be given her hand in marriage. You will have earned my eternal gratitude, and I'd be happy to call you son-in-law. If you save my daughter, you will earn the right to rule Marshwood by her side when she inherits my kingdom." "That's his plan?" thought Nolan angrily. Now everyone began whispering, most notably the princes. This added bonus had apparently bolstered their willingness to stick around. Prince Como raised his hand for the king's attention. "Can we get the deal in writing, sire?" "Boo!" Several townspeople threw things at Como, who ducked and quickly withdrew to his tent. The king and queen moved off the royal dais and were escorted by their knights back toward the castle. Nolan was furious, and he hissed to Caspar, "Let's go." They pushed their way through the crowds and headed for the castle. Caspar was right by his side. "Where are we going?" "My room. I need my armor and sword. I'm not going to sit around and let some idiots mess up the rescue of my sister." "But isn't that their job?" asked Caspar. "I mean, some of these guys might have fought dragons before. There might even be a handbook or training manual these guys have studied. You know, rescuing princesses for dummies or something like that." Nolan stopped and glared at his friend. Caspar gulped. "Sorry, I'm nervous. I ramble when I'm nervous." "Yeah, I know." Nolan took a breath. "Caspar, these guys could get Littagale killed. They don't care about my sister. They just want her future kingdom. I said that when this whole tournament thing started, and now—" He choked down his worry for his sister. "Maybe the danger of fighting Tor will scare off some of them, but the super greedy ones will stay, and they're the worst. Yeah, I see your point." Nolan stomped onward. "I get why Dad can't rescue her. He's 45 and way too old to survive another fight with a dragon. But I'm the prince, aren't I? Why do the princes always get out of rescuing their sisters? I mean, that's just basic family loyalty." They reached Marshwood's Walls gate, and the guard nodded at Nolan to let them pass. Nolan paused and looked at his friend. "It's asking a lot of you to join me, Caspar. If you want to sit this adventure out, I'll understand." Caspar didn't hesitate. "You need someone to watch your back. Besides, it's Littagale. Of course I'll help." An hour later, they stood in Nolan's room, looking at his armoire full of armor. They'd hatched out a plan for climbing up Mount Shadow, sneaking into the dragon's lair, and rescuing Littagale. The plan seemed solid, but they were debating who should wear the enchanted goblin armor that Nolan had won after defeating a troll who overcharged for a bridge crossing. And stalling, thought Nolan as he scratched Lucky's long white ears. We're stalling because neither of us has a clue what we're doing. Trolls I can fight. Dragons. Suddenly, a knock on the door caused them to jump. Nolan set Lucky on the bed and made a face at Caspar, who quickly closed the armoire. Then Nolan stepped to his door, threw back the bolt, and opened the door, trying not to look guilty of anything. His mother, dressed still in the royal blue dress she'd planned to wear for the tournament, entered his room like she owned the place. Well, I guess she does own the place, thought Nolan, but I'm not too happy with her or Dad right now. "Hi, Mom." He tried to play cool and not look at Caspar by the armoire. "What are you doing here?" Mattea walked to Nolan's bed, sat, and pet Lucky's head. "I'm here because Mirror kindly reported to me that you're hatching a plan." Nolan made a face of confusion. "Mirror?" "Mirror. On the wall." She pointed to the large golden mirror on his bedroom wall. "He reports to me whenever you're up to something. Usually I don't get here in time to head you off." Mouth agape, Nolan spun to confront his mirror. "Traitor!" Considering it only showed his reflection at the moment, he knew this looked pretty stupid. Caspar stepped over to examine the mirror without touching it. Then he made a face and looked back at Nolan. "Does anything in this kingdom not talk?" Mattea sighed and held Lucky in her lap. "Boys, you cannot go charging up Mount Shadow to rescue Littagale." "Mom," Nolan said tensely, "I am a grown man. You can't tell me what to do. Not now. Not after you and Dad asked a bunch of greedy jerks to rescue Littagale. Mattea raised a hand. "It's not what you think, Nolan." "No? Then what is it?" Mattea glanced at Caspar. He caught the hint. "I can leave, my lady, if there's something—" "No, he can stay," Nolan insisted. He crossed his arms at his mother. "Caspar's like a brother to me, and since my sister is—" He felt tears coming again and pinched between his eyes. When he looked back at his mother, she set Lucky aside and blew out a breath to prepare whatever she was about to say. "Okay, Nolan. If you insist, I'll tell you the whole story. Whether you choose to go after your sister once I've told you the truth is up to you. But you do deserve to know what your father and I and Littagale have done. Nolan blinked. And Littagale? His mother smiled. We all thought it would be best if Tor rescued your sister. Rescued? Nolan asked skeptically. Casper raised an eyebrow. This is weird, even for Marshwood. Mattea nodded in acknowledgement. Okay, you hear all the time that dragons kidnap princesses, right? The princess nodded. Well, Tor is a very smart dragon. Most dragons hoard gold or treasure or whatever, but what good is gold to a dragon, really? It's not like he's going to go shopping in town. Nolan acknowledged this with a shrug. So, while all Tor's dragon friends were risking their lives by stealing gold and princesses, Tor found another, more crafty way to meet his needs. He'd seen that a lot of these princes fighting his friends didn't really care about the princesses, and he wondered if maybe the princesses weren't so crazy about the princes. So, he took a chance one day and kidnapped a betrothed princess for himself. Before she could faint from fear, he told her he'd heard she was betrothed to an arrogant, unkind prince, and he offered to keep her safe in his lair until a worthy prince came to rescue her. In exchange, he asked that she clean his scales every day after his hunts. That simple. After a while, a wonderfully kind prince came to rescue her. They all agreed to keep the secret, and the princess left with the prince. Tor's been rescuing princesses ever since, making different deals with each of them. Nolan's mouth hung open. Casper looked equally amazed, but recovered first. So that's what happened to you, my lady? Mattea smiled at Casper. The princess before me, as she was leaving with her prince, told Tor about my misfortune. She knew of my... The queen blushed and rolled her eyes. She knew of my beauty at the time and knew that all kinds of princes were trying to marry me. She knew of my father's greed and feared who I might end up with. So, she asked Tor to kidnap me so I could choose my own next husband. Nolan frowned. So you left me, as a baby, and... No, Mattea insisted. She patted the bed beside her for Nolan to sit, which he did reluctantly. Lucky climbed up into his lap. Mattea looked at him lovingly. I didn't leave you, Nolan. That princess was a great friend and brought you to me every night. She hid our secret by returning you to my father's castle only during the day. I had you with me as often as I could. In a dragon's lair? It's actually quite cozy. Over the years, princesses have really left their mark on the place. Oh, geez. Nolan wiped his face with his hand. So this super comfortable dragon's lair is where Littagale is now? His mother nodded. If you don't believe me, Nolan, you can go see for yourself. You must swear, however, that you'll never reveal this secret to anyone. She included Casper in her motherly, royal, I-must-be-obeyed stare. Both of you must promise me. Casper shrugged. Who'd believe us anyway?